with her big dumb face.
The longest opening sequence.
It's Alice Midlife Crisis.
Oh my god, it's so good, guys.
We're not told that. Yeah, we do. We're not told that. It is written. It is written.
Hello, McCurdy.
Hola.
Hi.
¿Cómo estás?
You're not talking to a human right now. You're talking to a ghost because this movie killed me.
I'm sorry to hear
I'm
that.
dead. Now that I think about it, I should have put some kind of filter on so that it's like I actually am a ghost. That would be brilliant because
I changed my setup. Made it spooky.
I didn't even notice that till now.
Spooky setup.
Fantastic.
Here, wait.
Orange-
Let's hold on.
orange light and everything?
We need the ambience to be correct.
Oh God. Yeah. Do you know, before we even do any trivia of yours, do you know why? I know it's not like all horror movies have to be in October, but is there any reason why this movie's coming out now? Is it because this is like a throwaway movie and they didn't want to waste October on it?
Okay. We didn't. I don't think we mentioned it, but like back when they announced this movie, it was meant to come out in August, which is a telling sign. But yeah, this movie was meant to come out in August.
It's like the January of horror movies.
August is like, so just real quick recap. In my estimation of the movie seasons, the seasons of, like, you know how you have an advent calendar in the Catholic Church? There's a McCurdy has this is the seasons of the movies. If you will. So the summer movie season for me has always started in the beginning of May, because the first week of May is always the big Marvel movie comes out. And then there's a little bit of a lull in June. July is all the tentpole big movies, which we just saw with Barbie and Oppenheimer and Mission Impossible. And then we get to the first 2 weeks of August are kind of okay. Like they're usually a crapshoot. They're either really bad or they're actually surprises. Like, oh, this isn't too bad. Last 2 weeks of August are usually like the worst movies that have come out. And then you get into September, October, November. It's like fall movie season, or I should say September. September and in October, you get some of the potential
Oscar
stuff early fall. Yeah. Then November, like November to December into January is like the winter movie season, but it's really like November, December is like, those are like the tentpole movies for that time period. And then January is that dump month. And then we get into the spring movie season, which is kind of like a precursor. So you get February, March, and they've had good movies February, March, and April. So it's it's a hit or miss. But yes, this movie was slated to come out in August. Got moved because the Marvels moved, which is the next another Marvel movies coming out in I think it's November. So they moved things around. So they pushed this movie up instead of where it was originally. So, but as far as your earlier question, I have no idea. I've always assumed that it's because they could probably get DVD sales or, on the secondhand market of it if they
push it into Disney Plus by Halloween. Maybe that's where
right or something like they'll have it for later. So
yeah. But
and
everybody
this movie has a star-studded. Yeah, this movie has a star-studded cast. It's like they were trying to make it a big budget movie. So
and then things happened. Anyway, I'm gonna do my thing. Cool. Right. Oh wait, see, I went for a nice hard workout after this movie, so I'm a little behind because movies like this are the opposite of Oppenheimer. I walk out of an Oppenheimer and I go, wow, good movies can still be made, and then I see something like this and I start to think, have I ever seen a good movie? Are all movies bad? Am I just old? That's where my head goes.
Yeah.
So then I got to get on the bike, hit the rower. So anyway, Haunted Mansion isn't a movie. It feels more like a secret government IQ test. Anybody that doesn't laugh gets put on a watch list for being dangerously intellectual. Joking aside, it's nothing more than a payday for aging actors simply trying to fill their Disney contract movie quotas, as well as a payday for the producers who have those same high-profile actors say things like, shop at CVS, and gee, I'm hungry. Let's go get a Whopper cooked fresh from Burger King. This poor excuse for a movie is a sad reminder that postmodernism is cancerous to storytelling. Everyone seems stupidly self-aware that nobody is taking this seriously. Meanwhile, you could take any single line from this movie and give it to any other character, and nobody would know the difference because nobody has a distinct character while simultaneously everyone is the comic relief. It feels no different than Cocaine Bear, where the director said, just say funny stuff and be goofy. There's no story going on, nothing carrying us from beat to beat, so by the end, you're begging for the afterlife.
You really liked this movie.
Yeah, I think in if I'm going through specifically like the movies that have been the hardest to get through, I've never walked out of a movie in my life. Some people pride themselves on it. They're like, "Oh, that movie, I walked out of that," and I always go, "Then you don't have an opinion. If you walk out, you don't have an opinion." So, I mean, maybe in the culinary arts and like critiquing a pizza, you don't have to eat the whole pie to have an opinion. But when it comes to a movie, you should watch the whole movie. Sometimes it'll come back by the end. But in terms of like suffering, I'd say something like Knights of the Zodiac again was tough to get through, but at least there were a lot of laughs about like how bad it was. You know, like Scott and I were cracking up.
Yeah.
But
there's some stuff. This movie there's like one laugh. I had one time I actually laughed in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you and I will get into it because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Not that we're going to be on this. Not that we're going to be on two sides of the argument. I think we're both in agreement this wasn't a good movie. But and a lot of the same reasons. Like you kind of hinted at certain reasons. I was like, yep.
Yeah.
And
I'd say Knock at the Cabin and Cocaine Bear and Barbie were some of the most like difficult sit-throughs. Like actually finishing those movies was tough. I mean, like Knock at the Cabin was a breeze next to something like Barbie, but this year so far, I've Cocaine Bear was like I'm like laying on the floor with my sunglasses on at just like please end. Was this movie 2 hours?
Yeah, it's 2 hours. I think. Yeah, I think it was 2 hours 6 minutes. I will say this is close to like I didn't have this experience with Cocaine Bear or Knock at the Cabin or Barbie. I did have that experience with Knights of the Zodiac for sure. This was the first one that I think you and I both were kind of on the same page with that because like I had a rough time. Now I have to create some disclaimers before I go on doing my spiel. So I worked on this movie. In Atlanta. So I just want people to know that because I at least could say like there may be some bias, but I will also say when you work on a movie versus seeing the actual product, those are two very different things because what you do, it's not like my job necessarily affects the quality of the movie because the creative side does that. My job is to help the creative side do what they want to do. So it's like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to do. But at the same time, there was a lot about this movie I didn't enjoy. But it's like, it's weird.
Can you imagine if we were talking about your daughter? Like if I was talking about one of your kids, it'd be like, yeah, but dude, that's my kid. You know, like, and I'm critiquing her. I'm like, your screenwriting's lazy, and you're like, yeah, but that's still my kid. You know,
still my kid.
Yeah, it's always going to be different when you're involved.
It's like I'm going to have certain opinions about certain things that I'm going to be kind of careful on how I say things about this movie. But I'm just saying objectively, I don't think this was a good movie. So anyway, let's just go ahead and get into it. And unfortunately, I will talk a little bit more about working on it if anybody has any questions. But
as of now, I have a single.
I can't really say anything too negative about it.
I didn't take too many notes just because I just saw it today.
I think you and I remember very specific things that I was like, yep, this. You hinted at another one that I completely forgot about.
I have a single note, and all it says is Baskin Robbins. So I'm kind of hoping you have a good Photoshop on that note.
I didn't do a Photoshop this time. I'm sorry, buddy.
Man, but anyway, I'm just gonna minimize my notes and just chat the rest of the night because
all right,
whatever, a big whatever. Go ahead, sir.
All right, so let's get ranked, everybody. Shall we? Shall we get ranked? I gotta get to my cursor over here and buy our merch because you should buy Charlie. But also buy the ranked merch buy that shirt that Charlie is wearing. Buy the sticker that Charlie has in his hand.
Isn't that great?
and have the ghost put it on your haunted mansion.
Yes.
We'll get into that complaint of the movie. You and I will totally we're gonna see eye to eye on that one because that one was the most annoying thing by far in the movie. Okay, but yeah, Huevos. Where's Huevos at? Is he not here tonight? Boo.
I don't know. I don't have my eye on the chat. I'm like, I have my eye on whiskey because bad movies make me want to drink.
I'm sorry.
So.
I'm gonna have a lot to talk about on this one, unfortunately. Haunted Mansion. It's directed by Justin Simeon, screenplay by Kate Dipiode, and based on The Haunted Mansion by Walt Disney. That's what the wiki said, which I thought was kind of strange. Anyway, let's talk about the ride real quick. And I have actually a lot more to talk about the ride than anything else. So much like Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion is based on the ride of the same name. The ride itself first opened in 1969. However, the plans for the ride precede the opening of Disneyland, which opened in 1955. Walt Disney wanted to have some sort of haunted house attraction at his park, but he didn't want it to be a rundown mansion. The Disneyland attraction was based on antebellum mansions in New Orleans. The exterior for the Haunted Mansion was actually finished in 1963, but didn't open until the end of the 60s due to work on the New York's World's Fair and also Walt Disney's death in 1966. So the ride is a dark ride. Have you ever been on the ride? I don't know if you have or not.
I think I've been on scary Disney stuff, but I can't recall.
But you can't remember if you were on this. This is my favorite ride at Magic Kingdom. This actually is one of my favorite rides at Magic Kingdom.
Cool.
The ride is a dark ride on a track. It's called an Omni Mover system, or they like to call them the Doom Buggies. Featuring tons of special effects illusions used in old magic shows, such as the Pepper's Ghost effect. I think the one thing that most people remember is there's the ghosts that are dancing up on the ceiling, and you kind of go by and somebody's playing the organ, and you kind of see that in this movie. The masterminds behind the effects were Rolly Crump and Yale Gracie. Both names are used for characters in the film, one being the Hatbox Ghost's true name, and the other being the original owner of the mansion itself. Rolly Crump had recently passed away in March of 2023, and Yale Gracie passed away back in 1983. This film does feature many aspects and parts of the ride itself, including Madame Leota, the Hatbox Ghost, many of the talking statues, the Axe Bride, the Caretaker Ghost, the stretching room, etc. There's a lot more that I could go on and on about. The creative team behind the film had a tour of the ride itself, as they were incorporated as much of the ride into the film as possible. While the main mansion in the film is based on the Disneyland ride, you can clearly see that they based Crump's Manor, because there's a point in the movie where they go to another mansion, and that manor is based off of the sister attraction at Magic Kingdom in Disney World. One scene features the stretching room, which is the Disneyland attraction, is actually an elevator that lowers guests into the ride. At the Magic Kingdom version, it just stretches the room so they can kind of keep the same thing from the Disneyland ride to the Disney World ride. And then the Hatbox Ghost, which is the ghost you see in the middle there, is one of those urban legends with Disneyland, Disney World lovers. It was an animatronic where the head would disappear and then reappear in the hat box. It was a part of the opening of the ride, but was quickly decommissioned after it did not work, because basically they shined a light here and with a special type of light, like a black light, and then it would shine on the box. The problem is you could tell, so they just got rid of it. And then back in, and no one knew what happened to it. It's like they decommissioned it. No one knew what happened to it for the longest time. And then back in 2015, they brought it back and actually installed it into the ride. And I think it does work at this point. So that's part of the reason why they used the Hatbox Ghost in this movie. Now, I think everybody and their mom's going to ask me, well, wasn't there another Haunted Mansion movie? And like, yes, there was. That one's called The Haunted Mansion. This one's called Haunted Mansion. It's the only slightest distinction. And that one was released 20 years ago, back in 2003, which makes
real
me
quick.
feel
I just
really
want to
old.
say what's funny is that you have these multiple disembodied heads, right? Including the one you were just talking about. And then there's that urban legend that Walt Disney's head is frozen somewhere underneath, Disneyland or Disney World or whatever.
Right.
So maybe they're trying to tell us something.
Maybe there's more to it. So that film, it starred Eddie Murphy and Terrence Stamp. story about a family who moves into the haunted mansion, also called Gracie Manor, like they kind of suggest in this film. The most aggravating thing about telling people you worked on this movie is, yeah, I worked on the new haunted mansion. Oh, is Eddie Murphy going to be in that one? I'm like, no, this is a remake. It was the most aggravating. It was like the same. I told people I worked on Shazam, and they would be like, oh, is that the movie? Is Shazam 2? It's like, oh, is Shaq going to be in that? I'm like, no, that's Shazam from the 90s. Totally different movie.
Yeah.
I hate
big can of worms
really,
when you bring up Shaq because
Yeah.
Shazam.
You're like, yeah, it's just it's very aggravating when someone's like, wait, is Eddie Murphy on this? Like, no, this is a remake. It's not even the same story. It's not a sequel to that. It's a new one. Anyway, so real quick, talking about the director, directed by Justin Simien. He was actually a pretty cool dude on set. I'm not gonna lie. Simien is best known for his film Dear White People, which also became a net series on Netflix. This film was originally going to be made, the Haunted Mansion film, was originally going to be made by Guillermo del Toro as writer and director. However, this version also featured the Hatbox Ghost. Disney, of course, thought that this version would be too dark. Instead, it went with the Kate Dippold script. And if that name rings a bell with you, Charlie, it's because she wrote Ghostbusters 2016. Which kind of explains a lot of this movie.
Flashbacks to Ghostbusters 2016. I mean, even just in the look, it looks like the same DP is shared.
I don't know if it's the same DP, but yeah, it's definitely there's some similarities at least.
Everything is this like this blue and green, like everything's blue and green. Everything is just at a cartoon level of what you expect in a
I think it works
movie,
here, but I think it works here because it's like you're trying to do a family kids thing, but anyway, and they ended up hiring Simien, who had already slated to do the showrunner on Lando, which he has stepped down from that position, presumably because of obligations on this film, but who actually knows? I don't know. But yeah, that's Justin Simien. Moving on, we're gonna just move on to a bunch of these. We got Lakeith Stanfield. Stanfield, in my opinion, is probably best known for his role on the TV show Atlanta. He has also had roles on other films such as Knives Out, Judas and the Black Messiah, Sorry to Bother You, and Get Out. He's popped up in so many movies recently. He's probably like kind of he's in a bunch of stuff recently.
He might be the only good part of this movie. There's a part of this movie where they take Owen Wilson's character, Lakeith's character, and the little boy, and they go off to the second mansion, which was kind of confusing. It makes sense when you say, oh, they're referring to this other guy, but it was kind of confusing to go to another mansion, but a little sloppy. I mean, but those three going off together, I was like, oh, good. It's almost as if they realized that these are the only good characters, and so they're just going to take them out of the picture going on at the first mansion to a second mansion so we can kind of enjoy just being with them. He's the only person given a character, the only person given any kind of motivation or backstory.
He's the main character. He's given an arc. There's definitely like something more going on with his character than anybody else, but I do
and he's trying. He's the only one trying. Everybody else is like, this is a joke. Who cares? And he's like, no, I'm the lead. I'm taking this seriously. And
I felt like I'm
going to throw his name into the hat for Toast. I think he's the guy because
there was moments for me that I felt like it was almost like, and again, I have my own weird bias about this movie, but it almost felt like he was doing the serious bits when he had to do the serious bits, and then but again, some of the stuff is in the script where I was like, why would you do that moment here? That makes no sense for the characters, for anything that's going on. So it was like he was going back and forth.
Because
we'll get to the Baskin Robbins. We'll talk about Costco, Baskin Robbins, CVS, all of that. We'll talk about that later. We got Rosario Dawson. She plays. Why isn't my thing? What's going on?
Let me see if I can do it. Can I do it? Let me see.
I don't know.
There you go.
There you go. Okay. I don't know. It stopped doing it. It stopped working for 2 seconds. Oh, no. You got Rosario Dawson, plays Gabby. Dawson's first major role was in Harmony Korine's written film Kids. It's about drugs, sex, and they're all kids.
She was in Kids? No way.
Yeah. I've never seen the movie. I've just heard it's a really messed up film.
Yeah.
About kids, AIDS, a lot of really gross stuff. Not gross.
Ironically titled Kids. Ironically.
Yeah.
Because it's not for kids.
No. But you've probably seen her in everything from Sin City, Mission Impossible, Men in Black 2, Clerks 2, and she plays the live action version of Ahsoka in all the new Star Wars stuff, and they're coming out with a series. I think in August. I think her series comes out very soon.
Cool.
So I'm actually looking forward to that. I'll also say she was actually probably the nicest person as far as cast members on set, just always
believe it.
open and very friendly. But I've heard that about her on other sets too, that people said, oh, she's very open and very nice to be around. So she was really cool. I liked her.
Yeah.
And then we got the rest of the supporting cast. I'll just run through these names. Some of them are just like, we got Tiffany Haddish. She plays Harriet. She's a stand-up comedian. She's been acting since 2005, but her breakout role was in the film Girls Trip in 2017. You got Owen Wilson, who plays Father Kent. Of course, we got Danny DeVito, who plays Professor Bruce Davis, and then Chase W. Dillon plays Travis. Chase's mainly done roles on television, so this was kind of like I think one of his first big movies, to say. And of course, he's like an up and coming young child actor. So there's that. Then
you got that wrong though about Owen Wilson. He just played himself.
Oh yeah, no, I you're right.
Which is never a bad thing. Never, ever a bad thing. No,
it's not. It definitely felt like he was playing. Yeah, I had said that to somebody. I said it felt like Owen Wilson was just like, well, I'm just going to be Owen Wilson here, okay? Like, I'm just going to
do my thing.
Here.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be Owen. It was like he took an Owen Wilson character from another movie and just like stuck him in
because nobody gave him a character for this movie, and they didn't give anybody else.
The thing was,
like Danny DeVito's like, I'm just gonna be crazy, you know? Like, it's nobody had.
But Owen Wilson had a weird arc. Like, it's not revealed towards the end of the film because I thought some of the things he brought to the character were really funny, but like it just doesn't. It doesn't like even when you first introduced to him, it's just the weirdest thing because he comes in and he's just like, you want to be a hero? And the dude's like, what are you, what?
Why are
and
you
it's
in
like,
my house?
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. It doesn't make any sense. You're just like, you feel like, well, we'll talk about it.
It's one of those things where people
once I get past this,
they go, but it's a kid's movie. And you go, yeah, but there's a million kids movies out there that you can take seriously that actually have some kind of clear story. They have characters. You know, this is just one of those where it really is just like it's a pre-sold property, so who cares? It's a payday for everybody all around. Everybody's going to pretend they like it, and then we move on and destroy the next franchise.
Yeah, Nan said something about like hopefully McCurdy took a kid and could let us know about because this is supposed to be for kids. I didn't take my daughter because it just looked too scary for her. Like she just personally, she's just like not really into any kind of scary stuff. So I was like, I'm not going to take her to this one. I would have, but like based off of what I saw, I was like, it might be a little too dark and scary. So I'm not going to take her to this.
Kids love everything. They're just, it's great. Whatever it is, it was flashy and colorful, and occasionally the adults would laugh, so it was funny, right? But you know, like it's. I always think of Idiocracy. Remember Idiocracy? The Best Picture winner is just called Ass, and it's just
it was Ass. That's right.
Little kids like they'd be like, "That was the best movie I've ever seen." It was just like
it's just
kept
really
farting.
funny.
It's so funny, you know. Nothing against kids. I used to be a kid, and you're like, it was good, right? Because you don't really know any better, and then when you become a cynical adult who's seen too many movies, then it just like naturally you can parse out the wheat from the chaff. It doesn't become hard at a certain point, but it's like, it's just enough. That's what I mean. That's what I'm like, am I just old or is everything terrible?
I don't think everything's terrible. I don't think everything's terrible. I think like there are terrible movies and there are good movies. And then of course we got Jamie Lee Curtis. She plays Madame Leota. She was cool. I liked her. She was kind of her own. She had her own vibe on set. She was very professional. Like I had to go get Jamie Lee and bring her to a producer, and she comes right off the truck and she's just like, "Hi, I'm Jamie." Like just really like quick to the point.
You're like, I know, I know who you are.
Like I know who you are. But yeah, she was cool. I liked her. She was nice. And then we've got, of course, finally rounding out the guys, we got Jared Leto, who never was on set.
I have
Jared Leto. That's his voice.
Is that provable? I'm thinking this is
here's the thing.
A lie. I don't believe it.
Here's the rub. I might get in trouble for saying this. I never saw him on set ever once. But when I looked at the stuff, it says he voiced the character. So I guess they never said he played the character. But I believe it. So like I'm watching all these scenes towards the end of the movie, and I'm remembering being on set, but like it's not the dark and scary voice. Like we had there was a stunt guy and he did all the voices, but he did it like this. It was up here.
That's great.
So that was his version of the Hatbox
was he
Ghost.
Flying? Was he like
yeah,
flying?
They
on
had
cable?
like there's one scene where the scene where towards the end of the movie. So yeah, just real quick, I worked on the reshoots of this movie, so I didn't do everything in the film. I'm not going to say like the specifics because I don't want to reveal too much, I guess. But basically, yeah, I got hired on to do the reshoots for the movie. I'm not even credited, by the way. Like I stayed through the end of the credits. They didn't credit me or any of the other team that was here for the film. So it was kind of like on one hand, I'm like, well, that's shitty that I didn't get credit. On the other hand, I'm like, do I want to be credited? So
yeah, I guess.
yeah, it's like
should they have
know.
though? Should they have? Like what normally that
here's the thing. I don't know. Like that was kind of my first time doing like a reshoot situation. So I'm not aware. I'm just like, okay, cool. But no, but back to the Hatbox Ghost. Yeah, there's scenes where they would lift him up in a harness, the stunt guy, and he would do all the lines. Like he knew all the lines that he had to say for the scene so that they could time it out. But of course, it's kind of like that Darth Vader situation when you had what's his face in the Darth Vader suit, and then you had.
But that was James Earl Jones's voice. This isn't Jared Leto's voice. It could be anybody's voice because they manipulate.
Apparently, it's Jared Leto.
Okay.
Well, they also used Jared Leto's likeness too when they did towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, like there was like a pencil.
That's another issue I have with the movie.
You know.
Yeah, there's a image of him, and he's like, yeah, that's Jared Leto, and I was like, oh yeah, that's definitely Jared Leto.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's supposed to be his voice. He might be doing some, but I mean, you think about his voice of the Joker, when he's doing these little like low things. It's like I could see maybe him doing that because it's like he started off as a musician and he does music, and so maybe he just like
felt like a bait and switch. Jared Leto's in this movie.
Voice.
Yeah, like come see Jared Leto, and then you're like, he's a really good actor. I was looking forward to seeing him play a villain, and then I'm like, this is just like a cartoon flying around, which is fine, but it's not Jared Leto.
So that's really all I have. Has the Disney lords come down and shut us down yet? No, we're still on.
They're on their way. There's a
drone
strike currely targeting Maya
Charlie. Yeah, you said you were like, I'm not going to write anything down with this. Okay, so let's talk about the quick thing that you had mentioned multiple times. Oh, you want to talk about the list?
Well, real quick, do you have an initial rank?
I think it's under. I really think. I think it's under Insidious and The Red Door. I think that's where it belongs.
Okay, I would even give it Plane. I would. As of right now, I'm thinking just above Cocaine Bear. I just had like Plane at least had. Let's try for a story. There was no story here. There's hardly a plot to this. It was
there was a plot. There was a story. No, hold on. There's a
somewhere.
There was a story. No. There's a plot in a story in this movie. That was not the problem with the movie because I feel like that is a lazy critique of the film. I think the problem is
the movie
both of those things
is
were
lazy,
very clunky.
Dude. Everything,
hold on.
everything is clunky to where I'm like,
the story and plot are existent. The story and plot exist in this movie. The problem is they're very clunky, and like that's not the main thing that I think tears the movie down. I think the main thing that tears the movie down is the other thing we were talking about, where all the characters aren't acting within character to make the comedy, which is the thing that you'd said about Cocaine Bear, because I felt like. Yeah.
Everybody in Cocaine Bear's like, look how funny I am. I'm being like everybody was performing like that friend you have who can't ever turn it off. Where you're like, hey, dude, we're all it's first thing in the morning. We're drinking coffee right now. You don't need to be funny all the time. Just relax. And it's like, no, like I'm pouring the coffee all goofy. That's everybody in the movie. That works for one, maybe two characters. When every single character, and again, Cocaine Bear did this and this movie did this, when every single character is just trying to be bigger than everybody else, it doesn't work. It just becomes pathetic. And it just becomes like, so-and-so is supposed to be a professor and so-and-so is supposed to be a priest. But you can take any line from any single person and give it to somebody else, and you wouldn't notice. You wouldn't notice the difference. The whole movie, I'm thinking, now what if so-and-so had just said that? Or what if so-and-so just said that? There's no characterization. And then, and I'm serious. The story is, there's one story going on about a guy letting go the death of his wife. That's it. Beyond that, it's like, there's a guy who used to like he didn't even live in this
There-
house, but like
Well, let me make
he
this
did some
point. Let me make
stuff
this real
where-
quick point.
Well,
I
let
think
me
this
let me throw out my interpretation, just
Okay,
because
okay.
I'm trying to follow along, and I'm also
Right.
trying to fight the urge to not follow along, because it's like
Sure,
this
because
movie is
you're annoyed with the
nobody
movie in a
cares.
minute.
Nobody
Right.
cares. Nobody in the movie cares. Nobody making the movie seems to care. So other than you, but so
I'm wearing my Disney shirt tonight.
did you get it from?
Yeah,
Did
I
you
went
get
to
it
Disney.
from
Yeah, I got
production?
this is Disney
no, you
World.
got it.
No, I
Okay.
didn't get any production. I didn't get anything cool.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
But it's
again,
but
it
it's
was the
like
reshoot. It wasn't the main shoot.
But it's like there's all these people who, once you set foot in the house, you can't leave. If you leave, one ghost randomly haunts you and forces you to come back, which is like, okay, wait, why? Did those ghosts want to go to the afterlife? Well, they didn't. None of the ghosts went to the afterlife at the end. So why did the friendly ghosts haunt the people and make them return? But because you would think that it would be the Jared Leto ghost, the main ghost or something, that wanted these people to come back so he could steal their soul. But for some reason, the friendly ghosts were trying to get them to come back, which led to him almost getting his victory. That doesn't make sense. This movie kind of needed an element of there being good ghosts and bad ghosts, and the good ghosts wanted the people to come back to fight the bad ghosts. That would have been interesting. That would have been something different than every other, that's maybe in some Haunted Mansion movies, but that would have given us more specific ground rules.
That's in the movie, but I feel like
is it though?
It is. It is. Like the end of the movie, like specifically when you go to the third act and they're fighting in the cemetery. Like that was the I think that's the intention of like these are all these ghosts that they're trapped. It is unclear, and that's what I think is frustrating, is that there is this that's part of it. Like there's this idea that like, yeah, these ghosts. Well, no. Let me back up. Hold on. Because there's a moment they do lay down the breadcrumbs of this idea that's in there, and I feel like it's so washed down by a bunch of other stuff that it's hard to pick
Look
out.
how good I'm
If you remember, hold on. If you remember in the movie though, if you remember like the main character was talking about the ghost, and he's like, "That's weird," and they're like, "What?" It's like it looks like they're trying to run from something like that like, and so like while they're in the haunted house.
Yeah,
they're talking about all these hauntings are happening, but it's like it's not because they're trying to scare the people in the house. It's because they're trying to get away from the Hatbox Ghost. And like I'm like, okay, so there is like a little bit of that there. I will also say, Charlie, there's another aspect of it.
There's
another aspect of it that it's like more meta, and it's like if you've ridden the ride type stuff, you're like, oh, I see what they were trying to do, because on the ride, at the very end of the ride, they talk about the hitchhike ghost that are like follow you and they come back with you when you come home. So I feel like they were trying to put that element in the script as well, and it was kind of part of like the horror movie rules, so to speak. It's like you stay at this house, you can't be unhaunted, you still have to come, like, but the thing that I thought was clunky about that was like, well, why do they still have to come back to the like, why going back to the mansion, does that make it better? Like that part I thought was strange. Like that doesn't make sense. I get where you're trying to say, like, if you leave, at least you're setting up something where it's like, okay, you go to the house, and once you step foot in the house, you're going to be haunted for the rest of your life by these ghosts. But there's no like, oh, how do I undo this? And then the undoing of it starts to become like Owen Wilson's crazy Wes Anderson plan of like, all right, I'm going to get a psychic, and I'm going to get a professor, and we're going to do all this stuff. It's going to be great. Like we get that, but then it's like, okay, but that didn't come from like some book or something, or there was no incantation, or like Madame Leota didn't say the only way to stop this is you do like, it wasn't that. So that part felt weird and disconnected.
That's what I mean for me. Like me watching this, not knowing anything about the ride, not knowing have any knowledge about this. I say there's no story because it's just not this, again, apart from a man learning to let go of his wife, and maybe a little bit about the boy who was good in his final scene, but like whatever. It was just like a hodgepodge of scenes, especially in the beginning. What this needed was a just clarity so far as what is happening at any given time, and we didn't get that clarity of just like, here's our mission. What it needed in my book was the classic, and call it cliche, but then you put a little unique spin on it. It's no longer a cliche. Is that all these disparate people show up to a haunted mansion and they don't know each other, and then by the end they kind of grow into their own little weird family of like they all support each other, get to know each other, but they all show up randomly at the beginning, don't know why they're there. Well, obviously you have all these ghosts who want to be freed from Jared Leto. So somehow they made it so that all these people were pulled to the haunted mansion. But instead, we waste like an hour of having all these different people get tricked into visiting, like one by one. It's like, so the mom, Rosario Dawson, moves in with her son. They try to leave, but they end up coming back. And then I think they got Owen Wilson because he's a priest. And then Owen Wilson went to see Ben is the main guy, and like was like, hey, you have a camera.
You want to be a hero?
Ghosts. So yeah, you want to be a hero. So then he goes in because they, which
also begs the question is like, how does he know that? Like, how does that? That's a whole other topic. Like, how go through your thing real quick. I have a whole other aspect of this movie that really bugged me. But go ahead.
So one by one, they pull all these people in, as opposed to something with a little more resonance would have been everybody shows up in the beginning. And then that's where it's like, here's the professor, the priest, the mom, so on, the medium, so on and so forth. Everybody who has a character, and then ideally they would be written as those characters, and they would all be different. They would all approach problems in different ways. But with this, it's just everybody was the same character essentially, just goofy. Goofy
so on
things.
that, on the character thing, what you're talking about, there's an aspect of this movie that I felt like it's like they start to hint at like a character, but then the movie just like drops that for 2 seconds, decides to do something weird. Like for instance, like Owen Wilson's character, there was like this, they were hinting at some kind of arc where it was like you learn that he was a fraud. And I thought that stuff was humorous, whereas like he would do all these like weird things as a priest because it was like somebody who knows nothing about the Catholic Church being like, oh, I saw this in a movie once. Like, I'm going to pretend to be it. I thought that was funny. And then it like culminates to, he's like, well, I'm sorry. I'm actually not a priest. I'm actually a con man.
If we
and
go
I do
in there,
this
we're going
to
to
make money.
Yeah.
He's like, I do this to make money. And then he's like, so I was like, okay, I'm like, all right, well, you could have kept that like con man story. But then like, I felt the same with Harriet's character, with the Tiffany Haddish character was like, I'm like, was she meant to be like a real median? Because they present it like she is, but then later in the movie, it's like she's not sure of herself. So I was like, that's like, I would have loved that part of it if they made this overarching theme where it's like these people that came to the house, like they got all these experts. They're not real experts. Like they were all frauds. Like that I think would have been interesting.
That would have been
like
unique.
Even the professor.
Like the ghosts all bring them there to like humiliate them or something because they're all frauds.
Right. Yeah, like what if they were all frauds? And then like the professor also, like you find out like what if he's like, oh, he's like this really held in high esteem guy, but he's like, actually, I just stole all this information from another guy who died, and he just passed this along to me, and so I took his notes and made this book, and then I took all the credit, and like it could have been something like that. And then they all like have to like learn their lessons of being frauds, but then because they like it would have been nice if they all were like
they all have to overcome
we feel like we're frauds
together.
and then they're like, we're all frauds, but then we're going to learn from our mistake and actually do the thing that we like think we're supposed to do. So like they have all the characters could have that arc. Another part of it I thought was weird was like so that like there was that, but I felt was weird is like pretty much what you were saying is like characters would say things that just felt out of character. Like the one scene that really drove me nuts where I felt that way was the
seance scene,
the hibachi scene.
That too.
The seance. Okay, I will talk about. Let me talk about the hibachi real quick.
Bar. And
the hibachi bar was like the
quick comment
the
though. Between this whole movie that should have just taken place in one location, one single haunted mansion from beginning to end, maybe like a scene or two to set it up, and then maybe one at the end. But the whole movie should have just taken place in the haunted mansion, and maybe use flashbacks or whatever to establish characters doing different things, and whether it be the fraud route or anything else. But yeah, suddenly we're in a hibachi. What's the Benihana's? We're in like a Benihana's And it's just because, so like Danny DeVito, we can establish that he's just as goofy as everybody else.
The weird thing about that scene was like, it was okay. So in a like just general classic, like let's get the team together type movie or story, you have to convince different. Like I've seen it in a million movies. You've seen it in movies where it's like about getting a band together, getting like an Ocean's 11 where you're trying to get the team together. And like it's like, okay, I'm on board with this. Like in the beginning of the movie, I was like, okay, I see where it's kind of all these characters are coming together. I get what they're trying to do. So they have to go to a professor who knows a lot about the architecture of the building and all the places around. So they found a historian. They find Danny DeVito. He's at this local college. So they meet him, and then he's like really interested in going to the house. But then what's really strange is we cut to the scene where they're at a bocce bar, and they're still having this conversation, which doesn't seem out of sorts for me. But what was weird is like they do this thing, and then all of a sudden he's wearing a raincoat, and you're like, why is he wearing a raincoat? And then they start throwing shrimp at him like they do at these Benihanas, and he's trying to catch the shrimp. And I was like, why? Like that was the scene where that was the moment. That was the moment that felt like a Ghostbusters 2016 moment for me. It was just like,
wouldn't it be funny
really
if? And you go, yeah, that would be funny in like a that's where
but it's not
improv
true
has
to a
taken
character.
improv has taken over comedy to where it's like, wouldn't it be funny if? And maybe on set the day of, it's really funny to watch Danny DeVito do something goofy, but for an audience, like, have you ever seen either stand-up comedy or an improv show, and then you watch a recording of it? And I'm not saying this is true all the time, because obviously 99% of our intake of comedy is mediated. So, but when that happens, sometimes this thing happens where you're like, this was funny in the moment. Well, it's funny because it's organic in the moment, but then if it's not good enough, it kind of shows once you watch a replay of it. So something like that, that's overtaken what's supposed to be funny films, again, like Cocaine Bear, where wouldn't it be funny? Remember in but I'm trying to illustrate a point. I'm not saying that the whole thing's improv. I'm saying it feels like it's like, oh yeah, it'd be really funny if this thing happened, but it's out of character and it doesn't make sense contextually. And that's the one of the big ones from Cocaine Bear was when remember the guy from Game of Thrones, the big red beard guy, his wife or whatever gets brutally killed by the bear. And then the little boy meets up with him. Like the mom and the little boy meet up with him.
Yeah, that scene had its own issues too.
But my point being wouldn't it be funny if he's crying about his wife, but he's like, "Can I have some cereal?" And then he like reaches into the kid's Frosted Flakes and he eats one. It's like, it just shows a director that can't rein in the actors. And that's what I see throughout this whole movie is like, wouldn't it be funny if like, what if I'm catching shrimp? And you're like, what does this have to do with what does this have to do with the plot or the story? It's just trying to be funny in the short term. So in the long term, I just go, this is like the opposite of an instant classic. This is the type of thing where you could have this story that is just has that through line throughout, has like clear motivation for everybody. And that's why I say I don't read a plot or story other than one guy learning to let go of his wife, which is like, he tried, like Keith, right? He really tried and nobody else tried. They were all just trying to get a shameless payday. And the plot ends up just being like you have these mechanisms. Like if you enter the house, you can't ever leave because they'll bring you back. And then for some reason that's counteracted when like Jared Leto's ghost forcibly shoves them out. And then Owen Wilson even says, this ghost can't make up his mind. It's first he shoves us back in and then he's shoving us out. It's weird. And it's like, yeah, okay. So we're establishing that nobody knows what's going on. But my point being that there are these elements that could have added up to something. But in the end, I'm just like, okay, so now the big mission is to go to another haunted mansion and to get a hat. And then that's the whole thing, is that if we just have this hat, because it was like, you need a personal item. I get it. It's like kind of voodoo type of stuff. You need the personal item to banish him or whatever. But it's like in trying to avoid cliche, and by doing so, like okay, for example, I knew the movie was going to be postmodern garbage the moment that the first thing that happens is beyond Lakeith is the mom and son show up to our very just like generic haunted mansion, right? Like which I'll give them credit, like they're trying to match the ride haunted mansion. So sure, for some reason they're moving into this haunted mansion. Why ask questions? Whatever. I can accept that. But the boy starts to have scary things happening with ghosts, so you're like, okay, cool. And then he walks down the stairs. He's like, Mom, I want to leave. You know, the first thing that ever happens in a haunted house story is someone's like, we should leave. And it's like, we can't leave. We just moved in, you know, classic scenario. And, this is the postmodern garbage part, you know, the wouldn't it be funny if part, where the boy says we need to leave. And Rosario Dawson says we can't. And, you know, ghosts don't exist. And then in that moment, the knight, the armor, the empty armor, the haunted armor is suddenly standing in front of her behind the boy. And she just looks at him and goes, never mind, we're getting out of here immediately. And it's that moment where I was like, this is going to be Cocaine Bear. This is going to be one of those movies that nobody takes seriously, because in reality, anybody would scream their fucking guts out. Just like the opening of Ghostbusters, right? That librarian screaming and running. That's real life. And this chose to be just kind of self-aware, and it's just like it's like it's made by people who are tired of the same thing over and over, but those same things over and over are effective. Why? Because they reflect reality. Anybody seeing armor moving by itself is going to scream their guts out. And instead, it's like, make a funny little joke and run. And that's where I feel bad for little kids, where it's as if this was it's kind of like Barbie. Barbie was not made for little kids, right? It was made for adults. Well, that's kind of sad, because you have little kids sitting there being like, this is weird, you know, and then you have adults sitting there being like, haha, I guess that's different, but it's soulless. It's just kind of empty. And it just ends up being a waste of your time. It's like, go back and watch Casper. Go back and watch anything that actually takes itself a little seriously, instead of this thing looking for cheap laughs from minute to minute and actors trying to outshine one another.
I think when you say Casper, I'm like, yeah, that would have been a good template for this movie, because there are elements in this movie where I felt like, yeah, you could have gone the Casper route, and I think it would have worked a lot more.
Oh, but everybody's seen Casper. No, but who cares? Just
I don't think
that,
it's that. I really don't think it's that. I just think that, like, I can't say whether or not like this was actually going on or what was the issue. I just felt like the movie does feel like there's a lot of people, like people's handprints are all over this movie. Like 1 minute's one thing, another minute's another thing. And that's what felt weird. Speaking of which, because you had brought this up earlier, the most aggravating thing of the entire movie is it's like every line has to be sponsored by a company. And that was the most annoying thing.
I didn't find funny. Isn't that funny? No,
that wasn't funny.
It's pathetic.
That to me was worse than like your gripe with the Baskin Robbins thing. I was like, I thought that was funny in the moment. I actually thought that was better. But this movie,
did you think it was funny because it was? Wait. Baskin Robbins back in Ant-Man.
Back in Ant-Man.
Okay. You mean the dumbest?
Okay, I liked the Ant-Man thing because it was like, okay, here's the thing. The difference of the Ant-Man thing and this was that it was already pre-established that he had become a Baskin Robbins thing. That's why it was kind of funny.
Oh, dude, I'll give you.
It's like it's all out of nowhere
over this. I will give you
every
product
but
placement
this movie,
joke in Ant-Man over this. This was all insulting.
Yeah, but it was like the worst line I think was just like, all right, Ghost, sign your name or write something on this pad of paper that I bought from Costco. Like that's almost the line verbatim.
It was CVS. I even remember. No, it was straight. Yeah,
it was straight CVS up, or whatever.
Write your message on this pen and pad I bought from CVS. And
but it was not like. It was multiple times throughout the film. It was multiple times throughout the film where they were dropping product placement.
Let me burn this sage that I bought from Costco. And it hurts to see stuff like that, because if anybody laughs, that's what I mean, where it's like an IQ test. It's like that. You should feel insulted hearing that, because like we talked about all the way back in Ant-Man, my whole case with Ant-Man was that through all those movies, they tried to make their what is shameless product placement. They tried to make it entertaining, and they did. They went too far in Ant-Man 3 in the possibility engine, but because it didn't make logical sense. But in this movie, there was no trying.
There was something.
Yeah, but regardless of it being established, there was no logical sense to it. With this, it was just shameless. It was purely shameless, but it was played in a way that's like, isn't that funny? No, you're insulting. Not only are you insulting us with a lazy movie, but even your product placement is lazy, even down to let's get some Burger King so we can say that these tater tots are a ghost wink. That one was maybe, if it was just that one, I would have been like, okay. But that with everything else, it's just insulting at a certain point. Like it's like
I didn't
they
even
think we're all
understand
stupid.
why that was Ghost Wink. I was like, how is that one a Ghost Wink? Like
Do you remember
I was
Tater
like,
Tot?
what?
Like she likes tater tots.
Oh
So
yeah.
getting tater tots was a
That
ghost
scene,
wink.
that's okay. So that scene in itself was also okay. There are two other scenes.
Okay, wait,
that
explain
really
a ghost
bothered me.
wink. Explain a ghost wink real quick.
The ghost wink was like the idea that like ghosts, like your people, like people who've passed will do something unexpected or random that like it reminds you of that person. So the
It's
thing that they set
meaningful
up,
to you. Like
yeah, it's like
you as the
you'll
person
get it
that
and you're
they
like,
have
oh
a
yeah,
relationship with. It has
right.
meaning. Yeah.
And okay, so there are two scenes. There was okay. Again, this is why I say the movie's clunky and the story just like it's like the placement of events does not make any damn sense. And there's two scenes particularly that jump out at me. First one was the seance scene because you told me the seance. You were like, yeah, the seance scene. I'm like, yeah, like okay, we said about the CVS thing. That was weird. Like that was just like okay, ugh. But the thing that really bothered me, the momentum of the plot, let's just say the momentum of the plot is that these characters have all come together. They're trying to figure out, they're trying to understand the haunting, and they're trying to understand what they need to do to stop the haunting. So we already know that things are in motion. The characters are picking up clues. Like we talk about in any Bond movie, they're going to get a clue. Bond's going to get a clue. It's going to take him to some place, and he's going to try to take that lead and go someplace with it. So we're already in the momentum of that. And she actually has Harriet, the Tiffany Haddish character, actually has a moment where she like she gets some sort of information about Madame Leota, and she reads the book and she knows where she's at or something like. I don't remember exactly the specifics, but she figures something out. So the logical thing to do as the characters would have been like, we need to go to that room or we need to find this thing or whatever that is, right? But instead of that, instead of the logical, like what a character would actually do in that moment, because we're already in the momentum of the scene, our main character puts the scene to a halt to ask if she can talk to his dead wife. And that was like, I was like, what? That scene felt like a scene like that to me is like, that's a personal thing. That's something you talk about like between them going to the place. That's not something you talk about at the moment. Like we already know the stakes are raised enough for like this, something's going on. We got to stop this thing.
Something like, so you are the tormented soul.
No, it wasn't that. It was just the fact that he stops the momentum of what was going on just to tell her. Yeah,
the medium
she
said that.
figures
She
out
was
that
like,
he's the
so
tormented.
you're the tormented soul. And I like, that's what I mean. I'm so distracted by how nobody is a character. Like nobody actually is a unique person.
Well, hold on. There was one other scene that was like there was another
anything.
scene. There was another scene that really felt very clunky and just like it like that was. There's another scene that was even more Ghostbusters 2016 because that scene was like that felt like, why is this moment here? That moment should be in another scene later in the movie.
Yeah.
Like a private thing where he takes her aside and says, "Hey, look, my wife passed away," and like he could reveal that at that moment or something like a little more deeper. But it just feels weird in that moment, in particularly. The other big one that really stuck out to me was the it was a part of that ghost wing thing that you're talking about, where his character has this really, he reveals basically to all of the other people in the house that is with him, my wife passed away. This, like this is why I'm doing all this stuff is because like I was an astrophysicist. I was learning about how to do this particle camera and all this other stuff. And then my wife unfortunately passed away, and like we had an argument. Like it's this really sad story. But like it's underlined with like she ate cheese fries and cholesterol and all this other stuff. And so you're like, I'm like, think about like I remember reading it and being like, what? Like what is this scene? Like, are you trying to say she died because she like had heart problems? But like that's not how she died.
She would have died soon anyway. And he's like,
yeah. And then they're making jokes, and then like and then the whole moment is cut like by like that. The humor of like, oh, she probably would have died of high cholesterol or something. And I'm just like, where did this movie just like take a huge left turn at that moment? I was like,
because nobody cared about this movie. Like nobody gave a shit.
Someone thought it was funny. Someone thought that was funny, and I was like,
just like Cocaine Bear, I can't say it enough. This whole movie is, wouldn't it be funny if? And what you need, just like I said in that episode, is you need a director to go, yeah, that's funny now, but that's going to end up on the cutting room floor. Maybe we get a take of that, but then let's all take a breath and let's all stick to the plan. And the plan is that the professor guy should act like a professor and the medium should act like a medium. And everybody should probably, I mean, even if you add a certain quirk, give whatever characterization to them you want that either that is like a stereotypical professor or isn't.
One that
but
got
end of the
one,
day, though, not everybody can be the comic relief, and this is one of those movies where everybody will forget it and they'll go right back, just like Ghostbusters. Everybody forgets about 2016 and they only go with the original. I probably saw The Haunted Mansion, but I don't remember it. Like you said, it's 20 years old.
I saw it too, and I don't remember any of it.
But go back to that, because I guarantee Eddie Murphy probably put some effort into it, where it was with this was just like, if you're going to do this movie, then you also have to, we have to sign you on. You're obligated to make this many Disney movies. So they're just like, I can just go to New Orleans for a few days, Atlanta for a few days, and have a good time and just like check one off the list and get a payday. That's what this feels like. It's just Payday the movie for everybody. The joke is
another
on all
weird
of us.
gripe. Another weird gripe about this movie was the amount of exposition this film has to accumulate to explain anything in this movie, which is very frustrating when you're watching a movie. There's 3 moments where we get it, where I'm like, are we done with the exposition? Like, do I need more exposition? And what's even worse is like, it's all like the movie has to stop to do a slideshow, like, I do on this show. But like, it's like the first time is a flashback where we see this Gracie guy, and like, he's like, oh, he was the owner of the mansion, his wife died, and then he brought Madame Leota and at least that was like, I was like, okay, I'm getting this explanation. That's fine. And I was like,
I could have used that at the beginning.
I'm okay with that one.
I was okay with that one. Beginning.
I was like, she had, but it was like to teach the characters, like, oh yeah, so she was doing all these seances, but every time she did a seance, it brought a different spirit to the place, but it wasn't his wife, so he kept doing it. And then it was like, then they introduced the Hatbox Ghost. So that we do that one. And then later in the movie, we get another exposition about the Hatbox Ghost and like, who's the hat? It was like the movie had to pause and be like, who's the Hatbox Ghost? And then we had to see an entire animation of this character that they created where it's like, oh, this is the Hatbox Ghost. And there were other moments in this movie where it felt like even the very beginning was just like, I felt like we were being told the information rather than being shown it. Like specifically, I think Owen Wilson's character, when he talks to Ben the very first time in the movie, I think he's laying out all this stuff, but it feels like you're just telling us the plot of the movie versus
that's why I'm going to keep going back to, there was nothing to follow from scene to scene, which for me is there is no plot and therefore no story other than Ben, because if you are really doing mostly just tell, I need something to visually anchor me, and that visual anchor would have been just staying in the Haunted Mansion the whole time. But when I'm having a hard time following along, and the poor characterization, it ends up just being this thing where I'm like, I just want this to end, because it's like you've already lost me, and even like, what is the core of this story? Is it really just you need to get a hat so you can defeat bad guy? Because bad guy was just like killing people.
You're talking about the plot of the story.
I know, but my whole case is that it has neither. I think Plane actually had a full story, whereas with this was just a bunch of people trying to one up each other. Like, okay, even look at the scene with the sketch artist. So they're like, I think it was just Ben saw the ghost, the Jared Leto ghost, the Hatbox Ghost. So he says, they're like, let's go get an image of him. For some reason, they needed an image of him so they could like Google search him or whatever. So they go to see a sketch artist, and just like you would see in either Cocaine Bear or Ghostbusters 2016, not only is it that Danny DeVito and Ben are goofy, but also the sketch artist is goofy. Right, the sketch artist isn't just being some like old crotchety guy he's just like whatever, I'm just doing my job. He also is like big and goofy, right? Like, so everybody is big and goofy, and they're all just trying to big out goofy each other, to where I'm just like, this isn't. Not everybody can be the funny man in the scene, because otherwise it just screams of this movie that nobody's taking seriously. And then if nobody's taking it seriously, why should I take it seriously? Oh, it's a kids movie. I don't care. I don't care if it's a kids movie. Because kids movies can actually be really fucking deep. You know,
Yeah.
how many times did I cut to Pinocchio in the Quantum of Solace episode? You know, it's not like it's just movies like because like you said, you said that it's a lazy assessment. I don't think it's a lazy assessment if there is no story to grasp onto. And part of that is
no, again, like what my
follow.
argument was that my argument though is that there is a story there. I'm just saying the story is told very crappily, and that's what made so I hate when people say, oh, the movie has no plot. Well, if the movie had no plot, we would be sitting in a single room not doing jack shit. Like there wouldn't be anything to progress the plot.
Call it
if there was no
hyperbole,
story, if there's no call it hyperbole.
I'm just saying, but it being extremely weak is
you and I agree.
Is no different.
Here's the thing.
It's no different than there being no plot because there's nothing for me to grasp onto. I mean, this literally comes from a ride. This literally comes from a ride that carries you from one thing to the next. So you have a linear, logical thing to follow, and this didn't have a linear, logical thing to follow, and it was extremely distracting. Like even down to the seance scene where it's like the joke is she's like, I need everybody to take this seriously. So everybody, whatever, bow your heads, and I'm going to go into my trance. And she immediately starts to snore. She doesn't give us like a comical 15 seconds of silence and then a snore. She's just like, okay, everybody, and which I guess is supposed to be funny. And then they're like, oh, is she sleeping or in a trance? And then, but she's not sleeping because she immediately, it's like constantly just trying to be funny from minute to minute. So, from second to second, trying to be funny by ironically overwriting the thing that it just did because that's funny. Maybe
you have to have a balance. You have to have a straight man in any comedic scene, or else it's you don't feel it.
You have to have a little bit of logic.
You got to have
a through line of logic.
People have to stay, but yeah, even if the logic is everybody is on if everyone's like, here's the thing, and I know you didn't like Barbie, but I think Barbie does a better job of this, is that everybody still follows in line as to what the joke is, as far as like, for instance, when they're in Barbie world, everybody's a part of the Barbie land. They're part of Barbie logic. Like that's how the movie works. That's why I think the first act works really well because everyone is fitting with that. And the only person, but the only it stuck with his logic. But because the moment when Barbie's like, have you ever thought about death? That's when all the characters like they react because they're like, wait, that's not Barbie world.
That's breaking the rules.
That's breaking the rules. But that's like the inciting incident that helps the movie get along.
Yeah. And I said in that episode, that was the part of the movie where I was like, maybe this will be good because it gave you something. It gave you the normal, and then it came through with a punch. You guys ever think about death? And that's where I was like, oh, okay, that's something interesting just happened, right?
Well, okay, and then so back to this movie though, it's like this is the counter opposite of that. Where, and you and I, like, we're gonna talk at bon nauseum about this, right? Like it's just like we're going back and forth. But yeah, the issue with this movie is like nobody has a center. No one's grounded. All the characters are just like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this silly thing, but why are you doing this silly thing? Is that funny? Is there a reason why that's funny? Versus like, I'm doing this because my character would do this. And I felt like there's a lot of times where the only one that I kind of believe is Owen Wilson, but it's part of because it's Owen Wilson and every character he plays is kind of the same because it's Owen Wilson. But there were moments where I was like I kind of wish we had gotten, like, we get subtle hints of his character being a fraud. Like, and I appreciated, like, there was a little bit of an effort there to like make that arc kind of work. Harriet's character, I felt like they were going there a little bit where it was like I thought that it was going to be kind of a typical, like, oh, I'm a median living in New Orleans and like I'm actually not really a median. Like it would have been, what would have been great is if they were in the seance room, or not the seance, when they first introduce her and she's at her shop and then she says that bit of information that like makes them think like, oh my gosh, she's a real median. And then later you would find out that like, oh no, I actually just looked you guys up online and I saw that you were looking for this. And so that's how I knew this is what you were looking for, or something like if it would, and then you were like, oh, she's actually clever. That would have been cool. And then again, like we talked about for the professor, it was like not that he necessarily beat a fraud, but there was just like, he's supposed to be the serious like type. And the funny thing about him would have been like, if he's the serious one, he's like, I'm all about architecture and I'm all about this. And I'm really intensely love all that stuff. Like make that the funny bits that he gets. Like maybe he's like going through the mansion, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they use this type of thing in the woodwork or something like that. Like that would have been funny to see his
All
like
of that would
insanity
require
of
too
all
much
of his
thought.
his obsession. His obsession would have been really funny to see. But like instead we get these off moments of like the hibachi and like grabbing the shrimp, which feel more like that felt more like Danny DeVito in Sunny in Philly than it did for like this character in the movie. So it like definitely takes you, it whiplashes you. You're like, wait, what?
Everything you're saying would require effort.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So wait, let's go back to this list because I don't think we need to go that far. I think I will concede in saying it can be below plane, but I think the reason I would put it above plane is I think at least there are some inventive things in this movie. I think it does really well. Again, it's a bigger budget movie. You're gonna get the bigger budget stuff in the movie. Like for instance, I really did like the stretch room sequence where they're trying to get out of the place and the house is trying to keep them there, so they have to stretch. I liked that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I liked I
of course had Legend of Zelda flashbacks to the hallways twisting and turning.
Right. I liked all that stuff. The hallways and twisting and turning. I thought that stuff was really cool. I liked how finally they kind of all come together and they have to stop the Hatbox Ghost. I actually did like them leaving the house and having to find this other house, and then you go to because there was like this subtle thing about the movie, and I feel like this was more of the director's contribution. And I've never seen Dear White People, but it was almost like the sequence when early in the movie where he's just like has to be the tour guide, and like he has the most obnoxious people that are there doing the tour. And he's the only one who's just like,
you mean the Ghostbusters 2016? That was straight up just pulled out of. It was like the unused dialogue from Ghostbusters 2016. Remember the opening? Remember the opening of that movie? Yeah.
That actually was the only part I thought was genuinely funny about the movie. Honestly, was the tour stuff. But with that scene in itself, it was like it followed more of the rules that you and I are talking about. You have a character that isn't trying to be funny, that is more tired of the things that are the weird stuff that's around him. And he's annoyed by it, and that works because you're like, okay, there's a contrast here. There's already some conflict right here. Like you got these people that are, oh, I'm so excited to see all these ghosts. Tell us about this place. What about this? Is this place haunted? And then he's the one who's just like, no, it's not haunted. And she's like, I'd rather be doing anything else right now. And then eventually he.
Are you talking about the opening?
Yeah, I'm talking about the opening.
Okay. I'm talking about the opening to Ghostbusters.
You're talking about when they go to the mansion. Yeah. I was saying there was a little bit of this underlining thing about like going. I felt like between the opening and then that second scene with Winona Ryder, and the other stuff, like that was funny to me.
The opening I liked. The opening to this movie was good because it set up Ben's character, which you knew right away because the very, very, very beginning is him meeting the woman who would become his wife, and then. And it reads like a memory. It reads like an ideal memory of meeting his wife, right? It's glowing and happy. And then cut to he's you can kind of tell what's happened because he says I'm an astrophysicist. She says I give tours for like I give ghost tours, which is a big thing in New Orleans. Cut to him being just kind of a depressed drunk who is going, like you said, going on giving tours to really obnoxious people who are like ghosts, yay! And he freaks out on them and just basically says, life is meaningless, ghosts aren't real, there's no afterlife, and we're all just dirt. And so, boom, right away, it's like, okay, we're setting up an arc. Great. Like I said, this movie has one redeeming factor, and it's this Ben character, who is the only person trying. So. But when it comes to like weird setup and payoff that had people laughing in the theater, but laughing like this, where they're like, ha, like that. Yeah, like that's my best
not
impression.
Like not strong. Not,
yeah.
There's actually one strong laugh I had in this movie,
which I was going to ask you what that is. But real quick, they set up. They just in what seems like improvised random dialogue. He says something like, "I really don't like bed and breakfasts." A bunch of random people coming together, and then later it's like, "Oh, this other house was owned by Hatbox Ghost, Jared Leto, and since then it's been turned into a bed and breakfast." And it's like that was supposed to be funny, and that was the biggest. Like people were like, "Ha!" Like that was what I heard, and meanwhile I was just like, "That was that supposed." was that supposed to be a joke? Because it's not like he has to go stay at the bed and breakfast. He's just going to go in and out. He's going to go on the tour and then leave. So it just like stuff like that where it's like, did somebody think that was supposed to be funny? But an even more insightful part of that, what they said was the people who own it now are like amateur stage actors or something. And like they're part of like an improv group, something like that. And so what happens is Winona Ryder and you know, just like Ghostbusters 2016, they're going on this tour and she's just kind of bitchy, you know, like, and he's trying to find a personal item from Hatbox Ghost. And so he keeps asking, are those the actual pillows the guy slept on? Or was that his comb? And she keeps saying no. And I mean, I guess it's supposed to be funny or whatever. But then at the end, the owner of the house comes out of nowhere and he's like, he's remember, he's part of some acting troupe. And he's like, oh no, a murder just took place. Like he's doing the awful actor thing.
You know why?
Right?
I laughed a little bit inside
at that moment.
I'll tell you real quick. No,
I laughed. Let me finish my thought.
That's not the moment I'm talking about the movie. You finish your point.
Yeah.
Real quick.
Let me finish my thought.
I'll tell you what.
That guy, his approach of being the obnoxious, like, you know, like the groan-worthy, over the top, the guy the actor who owns the house, and that's how he exercises his I want to be an actor, he's obviously terrible. That was everybody in this movie. That's my point. When I say everybody's just trying to be funny and they're not, that's like that worked for that one character, but sadly his approach to the character is indicative of everybody else in the movie who's just trying to be goofy for the sake of it. And it's just kind of, it kills any hope of ever being anything that people want to watch every Halloween. Two things real quick that I want to talk about. Okay.
So it's actually, I think we've covered everything. I think you keep going back to the same point, and it's like, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm like, yeah. There's stuff about the,
I'm making it with different, hopefully I'm making it with different scenes.
Yeah, they're different. We're talking about different scenes, and it just goes back to the same thing. So okay. The first thing I was going to say to your point that you were saying, I did laugh a little bit, but that wasn't the moment I was thinking about when I told you I would laugh. Like I laughed about this movie. I laughed a little bit when he popped out. It's like, oh no, a murder. The first thing I thought of, Spectre Island. Like that's what made me laugh.
But that wasn't the one time you laughed, or that was?
No, that wasn't that time. I laughed inside because I was thinking it was more of just like the thought of when we talk about Spectre Island.
What was your laugh?
My genuine laugh in the movie was when they go to they have found they find the blueprints of the house, and they're looking through the blueprints, and they're like, this is weird. They're like, there's no seance room. What are they talking about, seance room? And then they see this little piece of paper and they lift it and like, wait a minute, there's another room here, but like it doesn't show up. And then they're like, oh, it's at the end of the hallway. They find this big portrait at the end of the hallway of the owner's wife, right? And so in typical movie fashion, they're like, how do we open the door? And Owen Wilson's just like, oh, I know what to do. And he like grabs this candelabra and like pulls it down and breaks it. Yeah. That was the moment I laughed. I thought that was genuinely funny because I didn't expect it. I was like, okay, that was actually pretty funny. And in this movie, I never had a moment like that. Like that to me felt genuinely funny.
The way this movie
never laughed like that.
The way this movie kind of established that we're gonna postmodern the shit out of this, and we're gonna just flip everything on its head and be as ironic as possible at all times. That was something that I could see a mile away. And so that killed the humor for me. Whereas if it would have been a more straightforward movie, right? If that had happened, it would have been funny. But it was like telegraphed a mile away because of the context of this movie.
I think there was another. Okay, so actually going back to that moment that you talked about at the very beginning of the movie, that was another gripe I had with this movie was the use of music felt not lazy, just very on the nose. Like there was that moment the moment that you talked about where she's like, no, you're right, let's get out of here. Like there's a music cue that you hear very distinctive that they're like, they lead you into that with like, you know, like that music cue of, and then she lets it out. Like they say the thing and then it does the whatever. There was one there that was just like, that felt really on the nose and did not work at all. I thought they used it when they opened up the door, and I thought that for some reason I found it funny. I don't know why. I just thought that was funny. SB, to answer your question real quick, why did they not release this Hold on. Why is this starred? Okay. Why did they not release this on into theaters and not platform for Halloween time? Well, there's actually two reasons for that. One, movies don't make money if they just release them on streaming. They're going to make money if they put them in theaters because people are actually going to go see those movies and they're actually going to get money for those movies versus if it's just for subscribers, they're not going to get any new money. So the idea is like, okay, if you release it in the theaters, people are going to go see it in the movie theater and behind whatever marketing budget they put for this movie. And then once it goes to streaming, then they'll also have the subscribers that are bringing in that cash flow. But you're actually bringing more cash flow and more like audience awareness of a movie if it's on if you put it in theaters and it's streaming. That's why they still do that. Because some people are like, why didn't you just put it streaming to begin with? Probably because there was already contract signed. It was part of the whole COVID thing with HBO Max and Disney. Was why are you putting this straight? Why don't you just put it straight to streaming? Well, like if you're already promised this is going to be a theatrical film and there's a contract behind that, and people are supposed to get residuals off the back end of that, and that's part of the contract, they're not going to be very happy if they just put it straight to streaming and they don't allow. Like, yeah, you still have to follow the contracts. That's part of the reason why.
Cynical me would also say that if they put this on streaming, there wouldn't be any buzz. This is one of those movies that if you can build up, it's going to be. Take your kids. It's going to be fun and a little scary. Blah blah blah. You trick them on that opening weekend, and then I mean, this movie will probably have a huge drop off. You put it on streaming,
I don't think
and
it's
people would either turn it on.
Place.
They'd either turn it on for their kids and walk away, or if they watched it with their kids, they would probably turn it off and just be like, "Let's just put on Eddie Murphy's because it's better." Or literally, let's watch Casper. We're just gonna watch, or we're gonna switch over to Netflix and put on Stranger Things. This is one of those movies that is that's why I say they depress me because I go, is everything bad? But every single era, every year, whatever amount of time you want to allot has always had its good and bad, and we remember the good and we forget the bad. And this is just sadly another one of those. Lately, Disney has just been teeing up all their classics and not really putting a lot of effort into them, it seems. And
part of the problem is Hollywood just stops. It's not that part of the problem is Hollywood is realized like, oh, it's we can still make money off an idea that has an IP that everyone already knows. So everyone already knows what a Haunted Mansion is. So it's like, oh, that's a safe bet versus like somebody coming up with an original story like Beau Is Afraid or Infinity Pool or I mean, Oppenheimer is a stretch property. There. But like, yeah, if it's a pre-sold thing and people are aware of it, they're more likely to go to the theater. But I do feel like this year we're starting to see where there's a lot of those movies that are coming out and they're not very good, or they're just not a lot of attention is put into them. And so they don't get a really good return on investment. And I think this one might be one of those where it's like if they just put like I had an argument with our buddy Kevra and he's like, well, it's not surprising that a movie that's based off a ride didn't do well. I'm like, that is not the point. You can make the movie can be based off of anything.
Pirates of the Caribbean is based on the ride, and it's fantastic.
The first one's great.
Yeah,
I think the first one's great. I would also argue the second and third one, as much as they are clunky, at least they're enjoyable. I didn't like the fourth one. I thought the fifth one was actually not that bad.
Sure.
Like,
but I would understand.
Whatever.
I would understand his point. If you walked into the movie and it simulated the ride, he would be 1,000% correct. But the whole thing is, and I made this point in I think in the Casino Royale episode where I was saying how people have this big thing, like they sometimes people have really bad logic with certain things, like the argument against The Hobbit being you can't take a small book and turn it into 3 films. Well, that's bullshit. That's bullshit because you can easily add in plot lines that weren't in the book. But when they screw those up, I mean, with The Hobbit, it's something else because it's like they only wrote 2 scripts and then they shot 2 movies and then they manufactured a whole third film. But the point I made in that episode was that take something like The Shawshank Redemption, which was just a short story, but that was expanded into what a lot of people would say is the best movie of all time. So the point being that if you do it correctly, it doesn't matter what it was inspired from. People will write entire films based off a headline or something. Like it doesn't matter where it came from. All that matters is that you put somebody in charge who can give you a singular mission for everybody to accomplish, and then hopefully a bunch of characters who are unique, who have their own voice, who bring their own thing to the story. And as we've said repeatedly over the last hour, is that this movie doesn't have those things. Like you I guess had the advantage of did you read a whole script or did you just read scenes that you shot?
I just read. So when when I worked on the movie, they were like, they're not redoing the whole movie. They're doing parts of the movie. So I don't want
Sure.
to go into too many
But you never
details,
saw a
but
full script, right?
I would see sides. Like I still have
Okay.
some up here where I like read through the scene.
Okay.
So I'd see like, and what was weird for me is watching this movie and being like, and kind of cool at the same time as being like, oh yeah, I remember when they shot that. Like I remember I kind of remember where I was at when they were filming this scene, and
Okay.
remember hearing it and seeing it at the same time. So then when I see, especially like the big third act thing, what's crazy is that whole scene where they have the graveyard, they fill up an entire sound stage, and they had all these like platforms with all these gravestones and stuff, and like they were separated. They were like islands, and they had to have stairs to bring all the actors and put all the ghosts on top of these islands because they couldn't just like stand on them, they weren't on the ground because they had to move these things for the effects in the movie. So like that, I remember doing all of that stuff. That stuff was really cool, and then to finally see what it looked like, the final product, that was like, oh wow, that's really cool.
I mean, but even down to like Owen. There's another part where Owen Wilson, he's being chased by ghosts, and he's like, okay, wait, hang on. He starts to reason with them, and then it's one of those things where it's kind of annoying because he's like you're all beautiful people, but you're really ugly. Could you turn around, while I finish my rant? And it's stuff like that where it's like takes
out of the logic of the stuff takes.
Because
it's
anything goes. It's anything goes. The movie,
Right. I had one other note that I thought was really strange. It was just like it felt like it was never brought up, or at least I never got the understanding of what the thought process was. So like typically when you're doing a movie, there is a thought process to everything in the movie. Even the movies that I think we would on venture like down on the bottom of the list are like, oh, this movie was garbage. I'm like, there's a thought process behind everything, and like even what the characters are wearing. And like, so every character in any movie has like, so there's a costume designer, and they consult with the director, and they figure in the art department, they're figuring out, okay, what is every character going to dress like? What are they going to wear? So, I mean, obviously like you have Tiffany Haddish has like this, turban type thing. So she looks kind of like a medium. Owen Wilson's character looks like a priest because he's a con man priest, but he kind of but he also at times he's not wearing that outfit. So he's wearing something slightly different. With the two that like struck to me that were weird were Rosario Dawson's character and Travis, because I was like, why are they wearing clothes that looked like they were from the 1960s? And I felt like the movie never really gives a clear explanation, because it does look like their clothes in particular do look like they're from a different time period.
Like almost it was setting up that they were ghosts.
Yeah, like I was like, was that another idea? Like was it this thing where like, because I do wonder if there was like an earlier thought process where like the beginning of that movie, they were actually souls that were all part of the movie. And then another thing I wanted to kind of quickly mention was that I think something that I think would have fixed some of the movie would have been if, because you were talking about like, they don't really set up good ghosts or bad ghosts. It's just kind of like they're all ghosts and they're all trapped here. And you're like, great. I think what may have fixed some of that would have been if they had spent time. This is what it would have been. You know how we've been going on back and forth about like, oh, characters start acting weird and goofy when they should just be the characters that are probably portrayed what should be on the page or what makes the most sense.
And maybe take the threat seriously.
Right. Yeah. Like a threat happens. They're like, oh my gosh. Like, and they're not making moments silly. What I think could have fixed this film, and I think it also kind of is telling of a movie like Night at the Museum, is if the ghost that they gotten more ghosts, kind of like how Madame Leota was Jamie Lee Curtis. She's actually like an actor. Like, it's not like the other people weren't actors that were in this movie. It's just they were more background than anything else. If those other ghosts had personalities outside of that one ghost, Gracie, that would, I think, it would have helped the movie. I think it would have been nice if like they had given more personality to the ghost and let them be funny, because the thing about that ride, and I do remember, and I was going to mention this earlier, but if you want to watch a really good documentary, Disney Plus has this documentary about all the rides, and they have an entire one that's just about the Haunted Mansion. It's really interesting and fascinating. But one of the things that they talked about was how when they were making that ride, they were having the problem of like, is this a funny ride or is this a scary ride? Because, and I think that's always been the problem with this movie.
You're dealing with kids, so
you're dealing with the kids thing.
Yeah.
And you want it to be scary because like one of the things they talk about is Walt did say that like when you make something really scary, people come out of it and they're all laughing because they had a good time because they were scared. They actually want that feeling.
Kids should be scared sometimes.
Yeah, you should
not
get a little
traumatized, not damaged, but they should be scared within certain
just
boundaries.
A little bit. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing about the ride that's so endearing is that you go on this ride. The beginning of that ride's really dark. It is like last time I went on, I was like, this is a lot more scarier than I thought it, right? Or remember it being. And I was like, it's dark, it's kind of spooky. And then you get to the graveyard in the ride and it's fun. And it's like ghosts are making jokes and laughing and they're all partying out in the cemetery. And it's a fun experience. What I think would have helped this movie is if those ghosts, like don't hire Owen Wilson as this priest, hire Owen Wilson to play a ghost. Yep. Very much like a movie, like another movie that he was in was Night at the Museum, where you had Ben Stiller. I mean, think of the comparisons, right? Like you have Ben Stiller going to a magical museum where there are all these things that come to life every night.
Come to life.
And then there's still there's still some kind of plot where they have to stop this thing or whatever from happening or else they all die or something like that, right? This movie kind of could follow a similar thread. You have some people who come to the mansion and they think it's this fine mansion. Turns out it's haunted mansion. But then we quickly meet all the ghosts, much like we were talking about Casper, right? You meet these ghosts who live at this mansion and they're actually all
not so bad, but
they're not so
there
bad.
Are other ghosts that are bad. And that's
or
why
it's just like, why are we here? And then you could line it up to being like about this Hatbox Ghost and all that stuff. Like that would
you keep it kind of friendly. You keep it by having some friendly ghosts, trademark wink. You could kind of anchor it for the kids, right? And then give them something to also be scared of. So this is kind of what I've been getting at all night.
If you take in Casper and Night at the Museum, take Casper and Night at the Museum and put that in a blender, you would have gotten, I think, a closer thing to what Disney wanted out of this movie.
The movie,
not something that feels all out of the place.
As I said before, if it was just a singular location, 99% of the movie takes place at the Haunted Mansion, starts with bringing, because again, you have an element of ghost winks, right? Where ghost winks could be something that kind of introduces select characters, but then one by one they come to the mansion, and I'd love the element of you can't leave and not allow anybody to leave at all, right? The fact that they could leave and then be haunted was like, you could maybe argue unique, but it ended up just being a wasted time versus one location, staying in this mansion, stuck in this mansion, brought there by the ghosts, the friendly ghosts, the Owen Wilson ghost. It's really charming and you like to hang out with, being the person who brought them to this location. Select people, like you said, Ocean's 11 people, like bring in a team of people who could potentially help us because this super demon ghost needs one more soul and all of us are going to hell or something. Like maybe we're all trapped forever. If he gets one more soul, we're all stuck here forever. That would give us a mission. But like maybe you would say, well, that was, and I go, but I didn't pick up on that.
Much more clear cut.
I'm sitting there,
I picked up that there was a mission
on any of the shit.
It doesn't help that Owen Wilson. Yeah, it doesn't help that Owen Wilson, like their mission as the story begins is like, how do we get the ghost to stop haunting us? And then it doesn't help that like that it felt like it was two missions, right? So like the first mission is Owen Wilson being like, yeah, we're gonna get all together, we're gonna get this team, and we're gonna get an exorcist, and we're gonna get a medium, and we're gonna get this, and they're all gonna come together, and we're gonna get them to stop the hauntings, and like, and it's like, okay, if it's coming from that character, like that felt weird because one, he's a con artist. By the end of the movie, you feel like it doesn't make sense. So it would have worked better, I think, if some other character had facilitated this plan or something.
It lost me from so early on that
I wish maybe they gave Rosario Dawson that. Like they could have, because I felt like there was a point in the movie where I felt like she had nothing to do. Like all the other characters did, and then she was kind of just stuck being the mom. And like she kind of had a purpose in the beginning of the movie.
Something I liked, something I really appreciated, because as you would usually ask, instead of just shitting on it wholesale, what's something you like? I like the scene where she's trying to, and this is something that would be in the better movie, the more fun and fresh movie. There's a scene where she's trying to cook breakfast for everybody, which again is fantastic because since nobody can leave, they're all trapped there. She's trying to cook breakfast and all the ghosts are fucking with her. She's like trying to crack the egg and the egg just goes flying, and she's trying to do this. And then that same egg comes back and crashes into her skillet. And it's just, so eventually by the time she's serving the eggs, they're shit. They're like over seasoned and they have eggshells in them. And she's just like, whatever, like pick out the shells. She's pissed off. That's a more fun movie where they're all stuck there as opposed to continuously leaving to go to hibachi restaurants and other mansions and wherever they would go for shenanigans or whatever, as opposed to that movie where a bunch of strangers show up. They think they're there for one reason. Turns out they're there for another. Maybe they all are related to people who died there, and that's why they're there. Something that would inject a little bit of fate into it, which a lot of these movies tend to do, but for a good reason, because it lends meaning. And then that would give us a simple setting for all of these events to transpire. And then that would also allow for just a plot that would organically, one thing would follow the next. And sure. For this, by the end, it's like all of this led to just getting the top hat out of a fire. Like that's where I just go, I'm out. Like I don't care what they were going for. I don't care what's actually there or not there. It's so, by trying to be not run of the mill, it ended up inadvertently being incredibly run of the mill and boring without doing anything fresh or unique. And that's where I just go, this is like, I already placed it in the list, but just like, that's where it's like, it belongs right there next to Cocaine
Yeah.
Bear,
Like when I got out of this movie, I was thinking, like, I was definitely thinking lower in the list. My thing with it between, I mean, I'm not going to fight you too hard. I really didn't want to put it next, like below Plane, because I do feel like there was at least some inventiveness with this film, and I did enjoy like the big.
Do you just mean in like the special effects and stuff?
I do like that, yeah, and like there were some of the special effects and stuff that I really did enjoy. I thought that stuff.
But as usual, I want those special effects, and I agree with you that those segments are cool. But I want to care. I want to be sitting there with characters that I care about, and the only one I care about is the main character, and not for any other reason other than I feel like he's the only one trying. So everything we've laid out that would, I mean, your idea of everybody being a fraud would be fantastic, because they all come in with this confidence, and then one by one we see that they all actually have nothing to bring, and then they would have something to overcome. And so
or then they have something that,
like, have you seen American Horror Story? Yeah.
No.
Have you seen American Horror Story? So no. The best seasons of American Horror Story are the ones where they have a haunted location that nobody can leave, and if you die there, you're stuck there like for eternity. And so the weird thing about that show is that what happens in those seasons, there are specific seasons that follow that formula. And the best part of it is that what happens by the end, and you'll recognize what I'm talking about, is that it becomes something of a family affair. It starts out as something really horrific. Like every first episode of that series is terrifying. It's a bit over the top because they want you to just be like American Horror Story. It's terrifying. But by the end of it, it's kind of sweet. It's all these people, all these disparate entities and just weird characters who, because they're stuck together, they kind of start to be something of a family. And you see that by the end. The final scene of this movie is Ben showing back up, and everybody is, all the characters are it appears as if they're all living together. Like they all want to live in the mansion together now. It's like one big happy family. And I would love if that had been fully realized. If by the end you're like, oh, how cute that Danny DeVito wants to live with Owen Wilson, wants to live with Rosario, so on and so forth. It just wasn't earned because of everything we've laid out. But that's the frustrating thing, is that's kind of what it was kind of getting at, was something that I point out American Horror Story as that concept perfected, where the end of the first season is straight up like the ending of a Christmas movie. It's like, and we're one big happy family, and you're like, oh my God, I'm watching a horror series that I actually am feeling really emotional over, and kind of like it, it's like watching Friends or something. It's like Friends as family, and it's really effective. Whereas with this, as you were saying, yeah, but look at all these special effects, and you know me, broken record, where you can throw all the best cinematography and set design and all that shit at me, but if I can't latch onto a story, there's nothing. There's
Sure.
it ain't shit to
Sure.
me.
No, my thing with it was just that I did enjoy, again, like I enjoyed the stretching room sequence. I thought that was really cool. I liked them running around and like the whole haunted mansion's changing. I liked the idea that they could go to the astral project thing. That was like that was a time when I was like, that's felt like more of a genuine joke that I could get my head around, where I was like, okay, movie. Like she said, what did she say? She's like, I reverse haunt or something like that. And they're like, but you can't just make up words. Why don't you just say astral project? That works. That scene, I think, worked for me because it was like,
if she was a fraud, that would have been perfect.
Right.
Perfect.
But that scene works, I think, because Ben is playing like the straight man where he's like, you mean astral project? Like any other normal person would know that. He's being like the real person, and then she's being the silly one, and that's why that scene I thought worked. But then of course, like that was the whole thing, and then it turns out she opens the book and that's what it says, and you're just like, he's like rolls his eyes like, okay, whatever. But like, yeah, like I liked that stuff. I thought that stuff was cool. Yeah, and I liked all the ghosts. I thought that element was really cool. Is just seeing all these different types of ghosts from different backgrounds and things. I thought that was kind of interesting because, yeah, when you go to the ride, there's not just like one particular ghost. The whole mythos of the thing was like 999 ghosts haunt this mansion, and like that's always been a thing that you hear as you're going into the ride. And there was stuff that, like, as someone who's been on the ride multiple times, like I enjoyed. I was like, yeah, that's on the ride. I like that. Sure. But yeah, you're not wrong in your assessment of the movie. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how I felt after I left the movie. I was
as
very
per usual,
frustrated and upset.
As per usual, you're the one with the, like, as we go on with every Bond episode, I'm like, I actively avoid behind the scenes stuff because I don't want that polluting my take on it. So you know, not only did you work on it and you've been on the ride and all this stuff, that kind of showcases the difference between being a part of something. I mean, even barring
this was one where I was like,
let me finish my point. But beyond you working on it, it's like you like the ride and all these things. And this references the ride. For me, the conclusion I always draw is that those are cherries on top, where I should be sitting here going, this movie was fantastic. And then you go, dude, get this. On the ride, they say 999 souls. And I go, no way. That's on the ride. That's so cool. But instead, I'm sitting here being like, this movie blows chunks. And you're like, but I like these details. And I go, yeah, at this point, I don't give a damn about those details, because first and foremost, the movie has to slap, as Johnny Huevos.
No, and then, but
it's got to slap. And then
but you and I said, though, you and I coming into this, I knew this was going to be on the bottom of the list. I knew as I walked in, I was like, yeah, I'm thinking at that list. And I'm like, yeah, like the only other one that the highest I felt like it could go was like Transformers Rise of the Beast. But I feel like the thing with that movie is that like the logic of all the characters makes sense, even if the movie's kind of like bland. It was like, at least even that movie I think works for me, and I think Knock at the Cabin was a much
everybody
better movie.
Was a character. Like there were individual characters,
right?
That bring their own unique voice and everything. Even down to the robots. Every one of the robots, even if they were goofy, they had their own characterization.
Right.
But this is like, this does having flashbacks of Cocaine Bear doesn't really help, where it really just comes across as something nobody's taking seriously.
I enjoyed Cocaine Bear more than you did, but I felt like here's the big difference for me between those two movies. I know you hated Cocaine Bear, but I think it's difficult to explain, because I do feel like saying this makes it sound like I think this should be lower than Cocaine Bear, but I'm also like, no, I think you're like, yes.
No, I wouldn't put it lower than Cocaine Bear.
No. I think that'd
be giving Cocaine Bear too much credit.
Here's the thing. Here's my distinction. I think Haunted Mansion versus Cocaine Bear. Cocaine Bear comes in being like, we're going to be a dumb movie. And like, that's our purpose. We're going to be this stupid movie about the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard of, like a Snakes on the Plane kind of situation. But so we're going to get a little more leeway. Hold on. You're going to get a little more leeway in the, like, that was really dumb. But I'm like, okay, but it's a movie called Cocaine Bear. And I get our gripes. I get our gripes. This movie, on the other hand, is a movie that comes in and it's like, we're a movie about a ride, about a beloved Disney ride that's about a haunted mansion that has all this history and all this cool stuff. And we're even going to throw all that stuff in the movie and all the ride stuff. But it's like, then the form in which it like is told is all crap. And you're like, what the hell did I just watch? Like it was like such a whiplash, because Cocaine Bear I can go into and I'm expecting it's going to be dumb but bad, but I'm going to enjoy it. This movie, I didn't want I wanted a mediocre movie. I wanted to come in and look at the list real quick. Like my expectation of going into this movie would have been
Here you go. I got it.
Yeah, pull the list back up.
Wait, there we go.
Yeah. So my expectation going into this movie would have been like, I was expecting something closer to maybe like that Scream, Indiana Jones, Super Mario Brothers, Ant-Man realm. Like I was expecting at least that. At the I was like I think it probably is going to be this. And then after seeing the movie, I was like, oh my God, no, it's not that. Like it kept going farther and farther.
As I say every episode, I go into it with high hopes. Every single movie, as much as it's, anybody would want to say, oh, you cynical bastard, call me whatever you want. I go into every movie with hope. So, I mean, what are some that I think Tetris was one where I was like, this is great. I had, or The Machine. The Machine was like, I don't know what's going to be, or even Missing. I remember these movies that are pleasant surprises. You watched Missing.
Yeah. I remember there were a couple that you were like, wait, Missing was actually pretty good. And Shazam, you said the same thing, which was another one I worked on. But I felt like it was definitely a different
my
feel.
point being that, we strive for accuracy in this list because it's not a shit on everything party. It's you get what you deserve. If you don't put a lot of effort into something, then I'm gonna shit on you because it's easy for me sitting in this chair or sitting in the movie theater seat, but it's with minimal effort you could rise to the top of this list, even in a kids movie about a haunted mansion. Because if this was Pirates of the Caribbean, I'd be sitting here going, Pirates of the Caribbean is easily top 5. The first one. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to argue.
Well, and then the other reason I had
easily top 5.
Another reason I felt like it was going to be a mediocre movie, like it was going to be like that mid-level movie that wasn't going to wow me, like the top list. It wasn't going to do that, but it wasn't going to be on the bottom. The reason I felt like it was going to be somewhere in the middle, because the same producers, the same people behind this movie were the people who did Jungle Cruise with The Rock, and that movie wasn't that bad. That movie felt like an extension. You never saw it, but it felt like an extension of like the Pirates of the Caribbean style of story. Like you had a little bit of the magic and all that stuff, and it was kind of Indiana Jones in its own right. And so I was like, okay, maybe these guys can kind of pull off something similar to that with the Haunted Mansion, because again, like going back to 2003, that was the same time Disney was like, what do we have product wise? What can we start turning into movies? And they did more than just that, because we had Pirates, which was a success. We have Haunted Mansion with Eddie Murphy. There was also Country Bears that wasn't very well received, but that was another one that they did that was based off a ride or based off an attraction at Disney World. Because like when you go to Disneyland or Disney World, there's a bunch of attractions there that weren't based off movies. When Walt made when they made the parks, they weren't like, oh, every ride nowadays it's like, oh, you get a new ride, it has to be based off some kind of IP, or they call it like synergy or something. Like they have some weird Disney mumbo jumbo name for it, but like every ride has to be based off something. Now, but back then it was like, no, we're going to create rides that like are going to be, some of the rides are going to do that, but not all the rides. So like you had Haunted Mansion, you had Pirates of the Caribbean, you had all these rides that weren't based off of anything that was from a movie or a cartoon or anything like that. Nowadays it's different, but ever since then, Disney has been like, okay, well, we should try to let's make movies based off our rides, which I don't think is a terrible idea. I think that at least is more interesting to me than going back to like previous movies and doing like, oh, we got to do a remake of The Lion King or remake of Little Mermaid. Like, that's kind of lazy, because that's like, I already saw that version and you're only going to stick within the parameters of the one that you already told, because we're already expecting the Disney version of that. So that's boring. I like the idea of going to do the rides and doing those as movies. That at least is more fun, because I don't know what to expect.
What you just laid out is more interesting. Disney allowing some other company that's not Disney to make live action remakes of their beloved cartoons. That would be better than Disney doing it, because Disney keeps fucking it up. And as I've said, rule of thumb with those is the animated one is always better. But if you gave it to somebody else, they might actually do a better job, because
part of it is because all those animated films are either based off of other things that Disney doesn't own the rights to, that
folklore
are
and all that stuff.
Like they're either folklore or they are based off, like 101 Dalmatians and Lady the Tramp are based off books. So is Pinocchio, but like they are not the exclusive owners of those stories. So there have been other iterations or other versions of that. I think Guillermo del Toro did a Pinocchio. I don't know if it was good or not. I never saw it.
Yeah.
But like, yeah. So it's like Disney shouldn't. I mean, but the problem is Disney's going back to the well and doing that, because these things that they're doing are already like, oh, well, I already did this version of The Little Mermaid, because the real Little Mermaid story is nothing like the book. It's a much more cynical and sad story, and if anything, that wouldn't make a good kids movie. But like but we have to stick to the Little Mermaid version that we did back in 1989, and we're gonna do that version now. So it's like you're stuck to doing a thing. But that's that's why I think doing the rides, I don't think is a terrible idea. Like I'm actually for, like, I'd love to see a Space Mountain movie. I don't know what that would be.
We said before,
what they were going to do with that.
As you know, the conversation we had, or where'd you go? There we go. What we said prior, where it's like, how could you base a movie off a ride? What the flaw in that, the singular flaw in that logic is that that implies that everything is based off something, and that something already has it all fleshed out, right? As opposed to the idea that a lot of movies aren't based on anything. Like John Wick is, remember, I thought that John Wick was based on a comic book. It's based on nothing, but maybe that's a poor example.
Well,
it's maybe that's
Charlie,
a poor example.
I would say you're more right than wrong, but looking at this list, I'm like, there's a lot of stuff.
My point being that, like, what is Megan based off of? Like, Megan is just
Megan. Okay,
like an
let's
original script.
Let's go down the list. Oppenheimer's based off true events, but it's also based off a specific book. Beau Is Afraid, I think, is an original. Infinity Pool, I think, is original.
Well, stop right there.
Oh,
stop right there. You don't
Infinity
even have to go through the whole
comic.
list. My point being that for somebody to say, how could you make a movie based off a ride? You don't have anything to work with. Beau Is Afraid, somebody sat down and looked at a blank page, and they came up with Beau Is Afraid, which is an incredible film. My point being that even if somebody said you have to like, remember the story behind adaptation, where the whole thing was like, you need to adapt a completely unadaptable book, and what's his name pulls it off in
seen that movie.
Charlie Kaufman pulls it off in a way that only Charlie Kaufman could. And I recommend.
I need to see it. But I know it's probably on my list.
Yeah, I would do a live stream just to talk about that movie, separate from any ranking. But my point being that the flaw in the logic is that if you're you got to make something based off the Haunted Mansion ride, well, then you're just going off and you're penning an original Haunted Mansion tale. Like, it's not like you have nothing to work with. It's just, tell us a story about a Haunted Mansion, which any idiot should be able to at least do a decent job on, but then throw in specific elements, right? So I'm just pointing out the flaw in the logic of a lot of people.
The logic of the argument. Yeah. Well, like you're going based off that. I'm like looking at a movie like Renfield. Renfield is based off of Dracula, which is a book.
But even if it wasn't,
it's like
a movie off of
book. Right.
But it's assistant to a vampire.
Hold on. You're taking the book, but if you look at the book, none of the story that's in Renfield is in the specific story that is being told in Renfield is not in the book of Dracula. So it's like you're basing it off this thing. So in that same logic, you could have 1,000 different versions of the Haunted Mansion. You know, it could have been a whole story about Madame Leota. She could have been the main character. You know, they could have done tons of different things.
My point being is that imagination can go a long way, and something like this, like bringing it back to Haunted Mansion. How fun to just give somebody. I mean, how many Haunted Mansion scripts are just floating out there, and you could take the best one and you could just say, change a couple of details so that it's specific to this Disney ride, and boom, you'd have a really good movie. But instead, they didn't do that. Instead, it was just like, this is a pre-sold property. We're Disney. We're gonna get some big stars into it. We're gonna get Burger King and CVS and Costco and whoever, Baskin Robbins. I mean, hang on. Real quick segue. The whole Baskin Robbins thing was that he was talking about is a very touching moment where he's talking about Ben is talking about his dead wife. And the whole thing was that one day he was busy and she was like, "Hey, babe, I'm gonna," and he was like, "Shut up, I'm busy." And so she went for a run, I think, or she just went out and she gets killed. A car hits her. But the joke that he was talking about was like she was always eating, right? She was always eating. And he said she went out to get some ice cream. Baskin Robbins, I think it was. And I was like, you had a sweet moment going on, and then you felt the need
it
to
with
throw basket. Like, that's what I mean. That's where I'm just like, this movie is just insulting me left and right, held together by nothing. Like they're just vague plot, vague story so we can just throw in these big names so they get a payday. We throw in these big name corporations so we get a payday. Right. We slap the Disney name on it. We slap a pre-sold property, Haunted Mansion on it, and we're done. We're out, moving on to the next thing to destroy. And that's where this movie belongs, just below Plane, which at least tried, but above Cocaine Bear, because Cocaine Bear is everything I just said, but even worse. So
yeah, I think
Haunted Mansion, which isn't a movie.
I think Haunted Mansion at least has, it has its budget. It has a lot of the aspects of the ride itself that I think at least elevate the movie just ever so slightly above Cocaine Bear. But just honestly, I came in thinking those were the things that I felt like would have elevated. I think, in my opinion, should have elevated more than Plane. But I'm not going to fight you. I'm just like, I don't really care.
We're talking about the bottom.
I knew after watching this, I was like, it's going to be towards the bottom of the list. So. Yeah.
So anyway,
I think we were both in agreement. Anyway,
right? Spelled that right, or do I need to capitalize the K?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think maybe you do. I think we're okay.
Quick Google search. Stanfield, right? Oh, it is. Okay, yep. Capital K. Fixing.
Yep.
Fixing. How do I fix you?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. Are you leaving? Me. Are you leaving, McCurdy? What are you doing?
Well, this whole night we're doing a Owen Wilson impression.
I like your Owen Wilson. I do like it. It's
I got to meet.
Wow.
Okay, so another Owen Wilson moment. Wow.
There you go. Great.
Wow. Okay, quick Owen Wilson moment story. I'll tell you. So Owen Wilson's an actor who doesn't necessarily. I'm not going to say more specifics than this, but anyway, we had this bike that one of our ADs she had, and it was like one of those. Was like a bicycle, but it had a motor on it. So instead of riding like a bicycle, you could basically, it was like a motorbike. It was like a motorcycle, but it was just like an electric bike, right?
Yeah.
So
you pedal a little bit, and it pushes you, it propels you forward with you just pedaling.
It could go about 15 miles per hour, which is more than what, so it was fast. Like you just press on it, like, holy crap. I feel like I'm going like really quick, fast. Well, for some reason, Owen Wilson wanted to try it out because I guess he, much like his character in Dispatch, the French Dispatch, who rides a bike in the beginning of that movie, he rides his bike to set all the time. He likes to ride his bike. So he got on the bike, and apparently one of the other PAs that was with us, he tells me the story because I was on set, and he says like, dude, he got on the bike, and it was just like an Owen Wilson moment. He just got on, he pressed the thing, he's like, wow, that's fast. Like he's literally said it. He was just like, wow, like genuine wow.
So you have to wonder if in that moment
I got a little
aware
I will
of it,
not,
is he aware in that moment that he's Owen Wilson?
He does
saying,
yeah, I don't know. Wow, but he it was cool talking to him, and I did shake hands with Danny DeVito. I never got photos with anybody. Like I was scrolling through my phone, I was like, I didn't take any photos while I worked on this, but I was trying to keep some level of professionalism, and I just didn't want. I thought that would be tacky to be like, can I get a photo with you? Like, I'm just like, who cares? I'd rather it's like just meeting you is kind of cool and just having these cool stories. But yeah,
you don't want to be when those moments happen. You don't want to be that guy. You want to just be professional and just enjoy what's taking place in front of you, because it doesn't happen every day, versus trying to capture it or whatever. And then that might, for who knows, because who knows what they'll think of it. Where sometimes it's, because if with fans it's different, but with coworkers, it's, it's maybe after some exposure,
Yeah, I think everything that I've worked on, everything that I've worked on, I have gotten closer to that idea. It's for coworkers and not your friends. They're your coworkers. The people you work with, you go to work, you work with them, and then maybe you get cool with them. But most of the time it's just like, I work with you, and then we're done working. And then if I see you out in public, it's like, oh yeah, we were coworkers. It was like, oh, hey, how's it going? But it's like, that's about it. That's it.
Yeah. Now the difference is if you're directing. If you're directing, it's like, okay, everything's said and done.
Have to be a little
Let's get a photo together, because that's the thing. Like, it's like we're gonna take a photo because we've achieved this thing together, right? And even if whether it's the director and the, I have the ironic thing with my career was that I have a lot of photos with big sports names. I'm not a big sports guy, so I show people, they're like, awesome, and I'm like, is it? I don't know. They were just a really cool guy, but cool. Be it a photo between the director and the star, or expand it to like the cast and crew and everything. That's different from like that moment of, hey, can I get your autograph? And it's like, I thought we were friends. You know what I mean? So so that's kind of the
I never asked for anybody's autograph or anything like that. I was just like, it was just cool to meet these people and be like, oh, and I legitimately got starstruck around Owen Wilson. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, I was a little nervous, and I felt weird because I talked to him for a little bit, and that was really jarring because I was just like, oh my gosh, it's Owen Wilson. Like, and I had I was like,
I wrote a script.
Keep it together. No, I never did that. But
you know what I mean?
I keep it together.
Yeah, and that's when he just walks off.
Yeah. Never had that. But, it's really cool to, it was cool experience. I will say this. It was cool experience. I really liked the people I worked with. I wish to work with those people again. It's just unfortunate. Like, and I have to emphasize this enough. It's like, it doesn't matter if you work, like, people are going to harp like, oh, if you're a layman and you're like, oh, you worked on a shitty movie. It's like, right. But that doesn't mean because my work, the movie was shitty. Like, the people who have control over the arcing of the movie, they're responsible. It's their movie. They're going to make the
You did your job.
I did my job.
Already, you did your job. Yeah.
I did my job. So it's, it was still a pretty cool experience. I really liked them. I liked the experience I had on the film. It was really cool. I could talk for days about that, just working on that. That was really cool. Yeah.
So anyway, what about Lakeith? Did you interact?
I didn't interact with him a lot. He was a little more reserved. Some actors are, some more actors are more outgoing. Some other are a little more like they just want to stay to themselves and just kind of.
He's still kind of establishing himself,
right?
Whereas, like, I'm sure Danny DeVito and Owen Wilson are like, what do I have to prove? I don't give a shit,
Yeah, I'm a household name. Yeah, like Danny DeVito and Owen Wilson, they're household names. People know who they are.
Yeah.
He was more reserved. I never really talked to him. So
being a little more cynical for them, if they're not, I am assuming that if they're not given a character, they're like, well, if nobody's going to give me a character, I'm going to come up with my own, and I'm just going to have fun, because at the end of the day, it's like showing up to a job where nobody is. Saying nobody cares sounds kind of cruel and a little much, but I'm saying where it's just like another day, right? Versus like, people are going to remember this forever. I doubt they were thinking that as they were shooting scenes about people snoring during a seance. You know what I mean? So,
right.
Or a hibachi scene that shouldn't have existed. Danny DeVito should have just showed up at the house. So I'm sure they just had a good time.
I'm still confused about the raincoat. I was like, why the raincoat?
Remember, he took the raincoat off, and then he got thrown into the mud, or no, he wasn't thrown into the mud. He got thrown out into the street, and then there was that scene where it was like, why was he in a chair out in the street? And they're like, he loves chairs, and it's like, okay, I'm getting flashbacks to Cocaine Bear. But anyway, before we go down the fucking rabbit hole again, Lakeith was the highlight of this.
He was the movie.
He was the no ghost pun intended. He was the soul of the movie. Okay, pun intended. But he was like, it's like, I got cast in the lead of this movie that could end up being a staple in every season in Halloween, and unfortunately that isn't the case because he's the only one who brought it. But this little podcast here is going to go ahead and honor the man for at least doing his best to elevate this thing beyond a complete and total lost piece of shit. So to Lakeith, hope the next thing you make is better than this, buddy, because you deserve it. Cheers.